Welcome to the Soul Call with Kelly B. I'm Kelly Butchart, soul medicine woman, energy alchemist, intuitive guide and change maker. I'm here to activate soul remembrance, unlock purpose, and support the personal and collective evolution into sacred sovereignty. This podcast is a space for heart-led women to rise, to take their power back, to walk in truth and live elevated lives of joy, abundance and deep fulfillment. Through powerful conversations with visionaries, way-showers and spiritual leaders, we weave ancient wisdom, quantum healing and divine insight to awaken something within your soul. This is more than a podcast, it's a movement, a remembering. This is the Soul Call. All of my offerings, social links and ways to connect are in the show notes below each episode. Be sure to check them out, I'd love to meet you there. And please remember to like, subscribe and share. Thank you for being here. Hi everyone and welcome back to the Soul Call with Kelly B, where we explore what it means to live, lead and awaken with soul. Today's episode touches on a topic that is both urgent and profoundly human: men's mental and emotional health. Suicide sadly remains the leading cause of death for men under 50 in the UK. In 2023, England and Wales saw the highest male suicide rate since 1999, with men accounting for around 3/4 of all suicides. In Scotland, the picture is equally concerning. 792 probable suicides were recorded last year, 590 of them men. The male suicide rate in Scotland stood at 22.6 per 100,000, more than 3 times the rate for women, with men aged 35 to 39 most at risk. These statistics are more than numbers. They reflect the lives of fathers, sons, brothers and friends. They speak to the quiet crisis of isolation, emotional suppression, and the lack of safe spaces for men to express what's really going on beneath the surface. And that's why I'm so honoured to welcome today's guest, Daniel Clayton, also known as DC. Daniel is a passionate and dedicated space holder whose mission is to support men in reconnecting with their emotional health, their inner wisdom, and each other. Through his powerful men's circles and community work, he creates safe, supportive environments where men can explore meaningful topics such as father-son relationships, emotional expression, and redefining masculinity in today's world. And what I love about Daniel is how grounded and heart-led his approach is. He's not only a loving husband and father of 3, but someone who walks his talk, holding space for others while staying rooted in family, service and community. In today's conversation, we're diving into men's mental and emotional health, something long overlooked in our culture, and how Daniel is creating spaces where healing, connection and transformation can truly happen. Daniel, welcome. It's a joy to have you here today.
It's a joy to be here, and I'm so honored. And what an introduction. My goodness, I'm on the verge of tears because it just really reminds me of how much work there is still to do. And you got it absolutely right, nail on the head with just about everything you said. And those statistics, gosh, tear at the heartstrings and then some. So, but I'm humbled and honored to be here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
It's such a pleasure to welcome you into my space today and to join my audience. So thank you to everybody that's tuning in and listening today to this very, very important topic. Now, I want to shout out to Rochelle Carslake first of all because I'm sending you lots of love, Rochelle, for sending me this amazing soul that's joining me for this important conversation today. Rochelle was aware of your work, Daniel, and had said to me, Kelly, you have to get Daniel on your podcast. And so here we are. And I'm going to start off by saying, because some viewers and listeners might be thinking, well, Kelly works predominantly with women. And indeed, yes, I do. That is the case. But I do have a number of male clients as well. And really, a lot of you know that I have worked for a lot of my adult life in education. And a big passion of mine was working with all children and families, of course, but the little boys that were lost and that were really struggling in school, traditional school environments, and helping them with providing tools and resources and helping them navigate that inner landscape to express their emotions because I could see that it wasn't always readily available in the home environment. And I say that with the deepest of respect, without criticism of families. I'm a mum, we're all doing our best. But as a busy working mum, I know the stress and the struggle and the strain of trying to keep all the balls juggling in the air. And throughout my career in education, it was screaming at me how much this work was needed. And now coming into the work that I do now, full time, when I meet with, grown men, and I'm gonna talk about some examples here, if I hope that you don't mind, Daniel, but real life
Please.
examples of men, big strapping men, that have powerful jobs and are fathers themselves and juggling all the balls and trying to do the best they can, who still have very much their wounded child who hasn't had that opportunity to be nurtured and loved in the way that they deserve to be loved. Because society had placed a lot of expectations on them. Family had placed a lot of expectations. They've been through a schooling system that had its agenda too. And they're lost and wounded and vulnerable. So I am just so delighted to have you here because I think the work that you're doing, Daniel, cannot be underestimated how profound that you will be touching the hearts and the lives of not just the men that you work with, but their families, their loved ones. So I don't want to say that, everybody that comes to you is vulnerable and weak and in crisis. Some may be, but I would love for you to share how this all started for you.
Of course. Um, I think if you'd have said to me 5 years ago, obviously 5 years ago was, COVID year. It was a particularly tough time for so many. And a shout out to those who've kept going. Um, if you'd have said to me 5 years ago, you'll be running a men's circle and, potentially doing workshops, appearing on podcasts, on radio, in magazines, I'd have said, you must be joking. I knew, I would have known that I would never have been ready because I wasn't ready. But something changed when I met my now wife. I was in Poland in 2021 and I had every intention to be out there for a year, however long, and I was constantly running from myself, essentially my own shadow. For those who've traveled, not even just young people, older people that travel and constantly, go on nice holidays or whatever, it's a temporary buzz, but your shadow always catches up with you. Um, and I met my now wife online through Facebook, right? People often malign social media, but it has the power to do good as well if used in the right way, in a balanced way. And shout out to a previous guest of yours, Tim Wild, because I was following Tim all throughout COVID, and he was a real kind of online mentor for me. really helped me a lot, and he helped thousands of people. Fabulous man. Um, and he said during one of his not Monday meditations, his Friday ascension updates, he said, shout out to da 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 da. And he mentioned three or four names. One of them was at the time Jenna Borum. And I looked up three or four different people. And I joined this group that she was running, Sun Disc Ascension, which she still runs. And I joined it. And it seemed like a nice group. It seemed mostly full of women. I often find that these spiritual groups are mostly female dominated. And I find, generally speaking, I'm also a teacher. This is my other line of work, language teacher. I often find myself a lot more comfortable with women because women are so much more at ease with their emotions, unlike men. Anyway, in the group, there were mostly women. And my now wife put up a post about trees, how much she loves trees and loved trees. And that resonated with me because I love trees, absolutely love trees. You know, if you think about all of the conditioning we have of tree huggers, they're all crazy and insane. Gosh, some of the wisdom I've been given through trees, unbelievable. And we got talking, and then suddenly we got messaging privately, and I thought, gosh, she's beautiful. So as you do, you kind of look at the profile picture and have a bit of a swipe through, and there was a man there. And I thought, she's already in a relationship. That's that Danny boy. Never mind. Fun while it lasted. No go area. And she kept messaging, and I sort of said, you know, are you not with this fella I can see in your photo? Oh no, that's my ex. We're no longer together. Oh, oh, I see. And we kept talking. And the rest is history. We just fell in love, or as I'd like to say, to speak my soul's truth, fell back in love because we are fully convinced that we're soulmates and that we've experienced many lifetimes together. It was like meeting the one that I'd always been looking for, but never truly believed existed until she suddenly appeared. Anyway, since I met my wife, I came back for her in October 2021, back to Britain. Um, she had two children, already had two children, and I took them on. She said, it's me and the children or nothing, and I took them on. I had no hesitation. I knew we were meant to be together. And we had another child, so we have three now, three little blessings. Not so little, I suppose. I have a nearly 17-year-old. But anyway, my wife has this amazing habit of always seeing the best in me, seeing my potential. And she doesn't have that self-doubt, which we're all sometimes, hamstrung with.
Mm-hmm.
And I found another brother online. Found someone else online, this time a brother, I should say. And I'll honor him by naming him Reese Walker. He does fabulous men's work, men's coach as well. He's been a huge part of my journey. He appeared on Facebook again, and there was some event in Canterbury. So for those who perhaps would like to know, I'm down in Kent in the southeast of England. And Reese was holding an event just outside of Canterbury, which is the nearest big city here, famous for the Canterbury Tales, etc. And I went to this event, and it was life transforming. Reese also ran and still runs an online circle with a WhatsApp chat and, I don't know, maybe 30 more brothers. And he said, do you want to come along to one of the virtual circles? We hold one every second Tuesday of the month or something like that. I said, I'd love to. This is what I've been looking for. I said to my wife, I've been looking for this. And we had the first session, and I just, my wife said, so how was it? And she could just see me. And it was just, wow, we actually talked about real stuff. How good is it to talk about real things that matter? Other men that are struggling. Gosh, it actually lessens my load. Because we have this habit, we all do it, whether we're male or female, of assuming that we're all down in the dumps, life is so hard, and everyone else is fine and living a great life and they're happy. No, they're not. Everyone has their own cross to bear. Everyone has their own struggles, You've only got to actually engage with people in the outside world and say, how are things going? Everyone's, doing their best, as you said before. So I was a member, and still a member of this online circle, and it's a great circle because most of the brothers that are in it are based either in and around southeast London. So they're mostly black, which is great for me because, coming from quite a small, posh white town, where, traditionally it was very posh, not so much now, but very white, very, very English. It was great. It was suddenly all these, second, third, whatever generation, Caribbean, whatever. It doesn't even matter, but just different. and it was great. And they were just brothers. We just got talking, and skin color just doesn't matter, right? Single dads struggling, you name it, partner, wife having miscarriages, struggling with children, God bless them, their vulnerability. So anyway, to bring us towards the end of this short anecdote, my wife said, you should do a circle here. And like always, maybe it's my autism, I'm not sure, but initially I tend to always initially reject things because it's outside the comfort zone. Or no, nah, I couldn't do that. Um, but then I had to sit with it. And once she said it two or three times, I knew she was right, and she's almost always right. And I've learned to honor her wisdom. You get these men that kind of, oh, she's always right. Oh, and they see it as a burden. I see it as a blessing. She's got this innate wisdom which females carry. Absolutely fabulous, almost like a druidic priestess or something like that. And I knew she was right. But of course, there was that kind of knot in the stomach of, gosh, what are people going to think? And anyway, long story, much shorter, I put out a poster. I put it on the local pages. And initially, it was met with a lot of positivity, especially from women saying, yes, yes, we need this. The men need this. And a lot of hesitancy and curiosity, perhaps, from men, even some criticism, which we spoke about when we briefly broke bread the other week. But that is life, isn't it? There's light and dark everywhere, right? Day and night, yin and yang. So we are now, as we speak, in the middle of May. The first circle was in June of last year, so next month will be the first anniversary of the circle, and it has gone from strength to strength. And I feel incredibly humbled and privileged and honored to be able to be the space holder to lead the circle, because I can see it having a difference in men's lives. And it doesn't matter. Numbers are not really important. People say, how many are you getting? How many are you getting? Does it make a lot of money? And that's a very 3D approach. And, that's not a judgment. It's just a perception or, an observation. But it's not about the money. I didn't do this for money at all. I fund this all out of my own pocket. I have no funding from any local, authorities or whatever. I do this all off my own back because it's nourishing for me as well. The brotherhood is the medicine is one of the catchphrases. And it couldn't sum it up better for me, being in service to my brothers, but also taking that medicine by sharing, by listening. It's incredibly powerful and it's potent and transformative. And, I've had some incredible things happen over the past, almost 12 months. Been on the radio 3 times, was on BBC radio as well, a couple of local radio stations. Been in the local magazine now 3 times, just been published, and we're in the new local magazine again. One of the ladies, Nicola Jacobs, shout out to her. She's a great supporter of us and says, tell me what's happening. I want to put it in the local magazine. And we keep getting closer and closer to the first few pages. We're now on page 10. We started on page maybe 18 or 20. So for her, it's a big thing. So we've had amazing support overall. It's been overwhelmingly supportive. And I feel like it's just the beginning, Kelly. I really do. I don't feel like there's so much more to do and achieve. And when you read out your introduction in the beginning, we cannot save them all, but there are men out there all the time that are waking up and starting to ask questions and, what have I got to lose? So to wrap this up, if there are any men out there listening to this or perhaps, following this or have followed the journey of the men's circle down in East Kent, you might think I'm not down in East Kent. Just try. You have nothing to lose. Ours is a space of non-judgment, of acceptance, of safety. It's a safe space. And it continues to grow organically and in an emotional and spiritual way. And it's just something incredible to behold. So yeah, that's the short version.
Honestly, I've had tears in my eyes. This
Bless you.
happened when we connected.
Mm,
We had a little connection call maybe a week ago, just a
mm,
few days ago, Dan, in preparation for this conversation today because it is so important. And I always say that when I have tears, it's because I'm really feeling the heart of someone, the
Mm, mm,
truth. And I'm sure everybody tuning into this episode, they'll hear the frequency and the authenticity coming from your heart and the humbleness. And even the way that you hold reverence for, others that are holding pieces of the jigsaw here, because we all hold our own unique gifts and our own, I call them soul gifts. We've come in
mm,
and, to support each other. We're all equal.
mm,
And just the acknowledgement of Tim there, and he is an incredible soul who I really, really believe is helping thousands, the masses at this time.
mm,
And it would be very easy for you, I'm assuming, to sit back and say, oh, I'm not a Tim Wilde, that's someone else's job, like, oh, we've all felt that kind of shrinking away at times in our lives, that, oh, I'm not, I don't have this big following.
mm.
And what I want to say to everybody tuning in is Tim is also, if you're familiar with Tim, and he's coming back on my podcast, I know he's amazing. He's had such an impact on me too, and he holds still this humbleness in his heart. He's also extremely funny. He's got he's got the humor as well. But in no way does he show ego. He knows obviously his personality self has to show up, but there is just such a humbleness with him as well. He's never lost sight of, I have these gifts and I'm here in heart service. And he takes him self seriously, but also not too seriously. He's got that beautiful balance. So I just want to say that, I love him dearly as well. He's had such a huge part and a big role in my life too, and particularly around that very challenging time, 2020, where a lot of us were struggling and finding it very difficult. And equally so, the way that you have acknowledged your wife and the impact that she has in your life,
Mm,
that just tells me so much about you
mm,
and the way that you honor your wife
mm.
and your beautiful daughters as well, and I just think you're such a beautiful example. Again, like Tim, like my husband, oh my God, I am so lucky with my husband. I'll not forget to mention my Stephen here. Honestly, I'm so grateful when I hear men like yourself who, you know, could just sit back and say, no, that's somebody else's job, or actually you're going to step in and take your wife's advice, where again, that reverence that you had, like, she is often right. The Druidic priestess in her is often right. She has this innate intuitive knowing. So I'm going to sit with that for myself. And actually, I'm going to step in and I am going to do this because I know it's needed. I'm not going to shrink back. I'm not going to shy away from my gifts because I'm sure everybody can hear the beautiful heart that you have, Daniel, the eloquence with which you speak and how you emotionally articulate yourself as well as mentally. It's so beautiful to hear even how you weave your story in of how this began for you, because that is so relatable for so many. And I really want to mirror that back to you, to honour that, to say, thank you. Thank you for putting your heart and head above the parapet to say, do you know what? I am going to be judged. Judge away. I'm going to do this anyway. I want you just to kind of reflect on that point there about the judgment or the criticisms or how has that felt? How have you broken through that?
Yeah, I think it's a good um, balancing question because it's not all sunshine, rainbows, and cartwheels. Um, it's been tough.
Mhm.
There's There are no two ways about it. It's been tough. I've not had a lot of criticism, don't get me wrong, but
Hmm.
depends how we frame criticism. You know, criticism is often associated in tandem with rejection or non-acceptance,
Hmm.
which kind of frames it a bit better. Yeah, I mean, there've been a few people that were particularly negative, calling me things like a fraud. Um, that's tough because even though I know it not to be true, it's still tough. I'm the kind of person where, sometimes you hear in all these Hollywood films, every man has an enemy. I don't have any enemies. The only enemy I might have is the ego within myself. I don't have enemies. I don't have people that I have to avoid in the street. I've had words with people, I've falling outs with people, but I don't have enemies. I don't hate anyone because hate is an incredibly strong emotion which can consume. And I know that through experience. It's almost as powerful as love. But how have I managed that? Empathy, I suppose, and compassion. You know, there's a particular couple that were unkind towards this movement and to me in particular, as I alluded to when we broke bread, I think a week ago, whenever it was. And I've seen them since, and quite interestingly, I saw them again yesterday. And even when I see them, my stomach still has that kind of turning feeling, even though I'm not sure they recognize me anymore. I've never actually met them properly in the flesh to say hello. Um, but there's that compassion behind it because for this young boy in particular, I see a younger version of myself. I was in his shoes at one point where I was bitter and resentful of anyone that had success and how has he got loads of money and how has he got, a girlfriend and how is he traveling? I can't afford it. I'm stuck here in this bubble and anything that triggered my inner wounding, my child wounding, as you mentioned in the beginning. It almost always comes down to, childhood wounding and trauma. I was there not that long ago, to be honest, and I went through more or less every distraction you can find under the sun to try and fill the void, plug the hole, you name it, drink, drugs, whatever, video games. So many young men are just, not just young men, distract, social media, pornography, uh, sports, drinking and sports together. It's tough. And then there have been instances of not criticism, but a very common response I've had is, "Oh, men's circle, what's that then?" "Oh, right, isn't that what the pub's for?" Or, "Would you come along?" "Oh, I don't know. Is there going to be alcohol there?" "No, there's no alcohol." "Oh, I'm not sure about that. That sounds a bit, well, I don't want to be getting emotional." But I realized it was a projection of other men's fears more than anything, because we men, and I include myself in this because I still have work to do, we men have been conditioned for millennia
Hmm.
that emotions are bad. Even the word emotions, emotional, has this negative connotation in English, the English language. If you amount of times you've been out on a Friday, Saturday night, and where's Jack? "Oh, he's in the toilet. He's a bit emotional." "Oh God, here we go." And it's that negative connotation. "Oh, he's had too much to drink." Because ultimately the emotions come out. We're just like these big buckets that keep filling with water, and eventually the water pours over the sides. It manifests in some way. And it often manifests in the wrong ways, like violence or abuse, not just physical, but verbal, emotional abuse towards not only others, women, other men, but themselves. And ultimately, the rejection I've used and kind of transformed into a teacher because it reminds me that one, it reminds me of where I've come from compared to where I am now. And two, there are many men out there that are still unconscious in a sense and oblivious to their pain and their wounding because it's just become a way of life. They don't know any other way. I didn't 5 years ago. Um, it's not easy, but it takes time. And I'm fabulously supported by my wife. She supports me in anything and everything. She believes in me, which is makes me quite emotional. But she believes in me. Full stop. Um, I have three children who give me opportunities to learn, and give me learnings every day to break the generational wheel of my blueprint when I was a child, which was some physical, but also a lot of emotional, psychological abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And that's no judgment on my parents. Again, it's an observation. And if my mother and father ever do happen to listen to this, my mother already knows that I forgave her a long time ago and I love her very much. My father and I have never had that conversation, not yet, but Dad, I forgive you as well and I love you very much. And it's an important part of the healing process, because then I empathize with what he must have gone through in his childhood, what my mother must have gone through in her childhood. They didn't have the resources at the time to give me what I needed. But that's okay, healing can be done. So it's a journey, right? We're all on a journey. We all take a limited number of steps on this planet in this existence. But it's a choice of how many steps. Let me rephrase this. The number of steps you are going to take. What kind of steps do you want to take? Do you want to carry on trudging around and dragging your feet as you have done? Or do you want to maybe try and walk on softer ground, feel lighter, And ultimately, you can lead the horse to water, but you cannot make it drink. The only person that can save you is you. And support networks are growing all the time. There's more and more awareness of this in the UK and abroad. So yeah, if you're not sure, if any men are listening to this, because I'm sure there are plenty of women listening thinking, I wish my husband would do that. God, I wish my son would do that.
Mm-hmm.
I hear this all the time. I get these messages. But if there are any men listening, brother, I hear you. I've been there, It doesn't have to continue though. You can change. It's not too late. We get a great age range at the circle. You get some men in their 60s, one or two that have been in their 70s, and we've had, late teens, early 20s. And when you see these men connect, when these age barriers just disappear, when these, class barriers, disappear, because that's still very much a legacy in Britain, of, the empire of class barriers. They just don't matter. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, if you're black or white, young or old, disabled or not, straight or whatever else. It just doesn't matter.
Mm.
We're men and we're all in it together. And brotherhood is the medicine.
That's so beautiful. So, so beautiful. And as we said in the intro, Daniel, so, so needed. I mean, to start with that was very purposeful and intentional on my behalf, because when I started this podcast maybe 2 years ago now, not quite 2 years ago, but I'll be coming up for that. I had recorded some solo episodes, and one of the episodes was about just this, about the lack of support and resources that are available for men.
Mm.
And we hear about women's groups and women's circles all over. And I host, beautiful, beautiful day retreats. I've got one coming up next week. I host a small intimate circle in my home here. But I also I go along to lots of things, but I'm currently immersed in shamanic training. And it's women and men. And there's a beautiful blend of energies there, and such a beautiful family. It feels like a family where, like you say, it doesn't matter what your background is, what your daytime job is, what your, all of the labels just disappear, and we just all see each other as brothers and sisters. And for some people, even some, I can feel, some people will maybe recoil at brothers and sisters, but that's what we need to get back to, because we've lost sight of what it truly is to be a human. Many of us have got lost in all the expectations that are placed upon us from our parents, our family, where we grew up, society, even cultural, the media, what's just everything that's been presented or projected onto us. We're all running our own programs. And really what I talk about, and I'm in the business of, is getting back to remember who we truly are and what makes us unique as humans, because we have been given emotions. And when I used to have little boys who were completely dysregulated in school, and they're like tearing around the school, shouting and swearing and hurling furniture around and calling me everything under the sun, they were so dysregulated, but they were expressing all of these emotions that had been suppressed for a long time.
Mm,
And really, what we were having to do was really think about, well, how do we regulate our emotions at an early age? How can we express ourselves in a healthy way? Now, I know, speaking personally growing up, I had a lot of physical chastisement
mm,
growing up, and it was a clip around the ear, and do you want another one? If you don't stop crying, you know, and that again, without judgment, um, was how it was kind of done then. That wasn't unusual to be physically chastised. But when you start to grow up, you start to resent that, you become frustrated with that, you become angry. And I went through all the kind of rites of passage that you're talking about as well, because you're looking outside of yourself to try and bring comfort to yourself. So I explored different religions. I was out, in the rave scene and drinking and all the rest of it. And just trying to reach that place of euphoria and bliss. But actually, what I was searching for was peace inside of me, peace,
mm.
deep, deep
Yeah.
peace. And I can honestly say that I have that now 99% of the time, but the work's never done. So I continue to find these spaces where I feel like I belong, where it feels safe to be me, where I can be vulnerable, I can be raw. I don't have to smile and pretend that everything's okay. And there is such a lack of this for men.
Mm, mm,
And I know that as a woman, I would love to serve in this way, but I know that men like to be with men. And I think this is why there's been such gravitas for sports. It's like a bear in the hand in the football because, well, I kind of belong here then. And this feels comfortable to me or safe to me. But we're not getting to the root cause of healing these wounds. We're doing bonding, and that's great to an extent, but actually, you're taking it a step further because you're opening up conversations in this beautiful, safe, and sacred way where men get to be vulnerable, get to talk about as much or as little as I'm assuming that they want to, Daniel. So, what does it feel like if a man was thinking, right, this sounds good to me? And I would actually like to explore this and, come to a men's group. Now, for everybody tuning into this, they might not be able to access your physical group in Kent, but there are other men's groups like Andy's Man's Club is one example here that I'm aware of in Scotland that's really taken off. What what do you offer other than just going to the pub or going to a game of football and bonding? What does it look like and feel like coming along to these spaces?
So the circle is not just a figurative name, it's a literal thing as well. We set the chairs up in a local church hall in a circle. And it gives a nice sense of unity because I think if you were to set the chairs up, in rows like in church or in school, it would be
Mhm.
but it's a circle, right? And I think that's important. It has evolved. You have to understand it has evolved. The first three or four circles, I had one technique that I was going with, which was powerful, very powerful, but wasn't for everyone. The thing is that I have a lot of messages from men that clearly see it on social media and think, this looks good. I'm interested. And then the men's circle, East Kent, writes back and says, if you're interested, the next date is this. Let's say every 2 out of 5 or 3 out of 5 then disappear because they think, oh God, it's something real. Huh, right? There's pressure, there's expectation for me to go. This person messaging me expects me to go. No, I don't. Of course I don't. I know this game. I know this game, how it works. Game maybe isn't the right word. I know this, how it unfolds. A lot of men will just disappear. And that's
Mhm.
fine. I get that. There have been plenty of men that have said they'll be there and they won't show up. And they
Mhm.
haven't shown up. And you cannot judge because ultimately the ethos and the philosophy and the love of the circle has to extend beyond that room. There's no point me going around and saying, yeah, it's me, DC, space holder, men's circle, peace and love. And then the next day on the street, oh, what are you driving like that for? And, sticking my fingers up. I have to try and live my life this way, which has been incredibly transformative and, instructional, educational. So a lot of men message me and they get to the point where, yeah, I'll come along. And then a few message, different ages, bearing in mind I'm almost 37. There's always this kind of notion of he's younger than me. Oh, what does he know? You know? But I get men in their 40s, 50s saying, I'm feeling a bit anxious about walking through the door. And you just have to acknowledge that. When I was a boy, it was, I was never given that space to say, I'm feeling anxious. But if I had said, I'm feeling anxious, it'd be, stop being silly. Oh, stop being silly. Come on, don't muck around. That would have been it. That would have been it. And I dare say there were plenty of children from the 80s, 90s, and before that would have had that as well. Thankfully, things are changing. One young man that joined the circle recently, I won't name him for obvious reasons, but he messaged me and said, I'm anxious. I'm anxious about walking through the door. And I messaged back and said, that's fine. It's absolutely fine. Even if you walk through the door and you walk straight back out, that's fine. You might walk in, you might sit there for 10 minutes and think this is not for me, and you're welcome to leave. You might come in and sit there all evening and not speak a word. That's absolutely fine. And he came in, and I'd recognized him because it's not a big town here, about 5,000 people. I said, oh, okay, you're the young fella I've been messaging. He said, yeah, I'm quite anxious, to be honest. And I said, no problem. Put my hand on his shoulder and just said, if it's any consolation, I'm quite anxious too. I tend to get anxious before it all begins because I put pressure on myself to, get in the game, in the zone, game mode. And he sat down. You could see him, kind of, hi, nice to meet you, everyone. How you doing? Within 10 minutes, we got talking and he was listening to older men. And you could see him nodding and affirming and, oh, yeah. And then he started speaking up, sharing his views. And now, God bless him, he's like a bad penny. We cannot get rid of him, kind of thing. He's brought so much to the circle in terms of wisdom beyond his years. Another young man that's most likely autistic on the spectrum. It's becoming so common, and it takes one to know one. I can often sniff out, my fellow autismos, as it were. Telltale signs, lack of eye contact, poor social skills, fidgeting, going off on rants that are completely irrelevant to, whatever's going on. Anyway, he's been fabulous and he's really doing well being around older men that have had quite a bit of life experience, that have fallen and scratched their knees and scratched their elbows and got back up regardless, and have got a few divorces under the belt, not living with their children, mortgages, all of the usual stuff. And he cannot truly understand that. He hasn't experienced it, but he can listen and he can absorb that. And we've done extra stuff outside the circle, different events, which he's come to. We run a coffee morning, which we had last Saturday. He came to that. He made a point of coming to it, and I reflected on this and I thought to myself, this young man's 23. And I thought, who was I at 23? What was I doing? And the answer is vaguely, because I don't really remember, if I'm honest. I was traveling across Europe somewhere, working for a French holiday company, drinking my way around and running from myself. Scared of females. Definitely scared of females because I had real intimacy issues, all stemming from childhood trauma of not being good enough, ultimately. And what I could have done with is a group like that. Now, does that make me slightly envious or resentful? No, not at all. Things are unfolding exactly as they are meant to be. That perhaps wasn't meant for me, but instead I can give something back. But what's great about that as well is there are some older men in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and I tried to keep in touch with everyone. And they kind of mentor me a little bit and say, well done, DC, you did a really good job last night. Make sure you get some time for yourself. And I listen to that. You have to be humble. You have to be open-minded. People come with ideas. Sure, I'm open. People say, look, this is a bit much for me. I won't be back. I have to take that on the chin. One or two men have done that. We talked about alcohol and peer pressure in February. And one or two of the men just haven't come back because perhaps they couldn't face their own demons, that figurative mirror of perhaps I do drink a lot. Perhaps I do use it as a crutch. That's not me judging. We talked about it openly, So there's so much that can be taken for everyone. So for any men that were to come along, I think they'd feel, and I talk about the boys, right? The boys, the men, the brothers at the circle. The past two or three circles, things have just gone up a notch. There's so much. I said this when we met a week ago or so. There's so much emotional wisdom within the group. I've got recovering alcoholics, divorced men. I've got men that no longer see their children or, co-parent. I've got men in happy relationships, happily married, single men, men that cannot have children. You name it. We've got it. And there's so much emotional wisdom within that space. I just sit and listen and absorb. And often it takes me 3 or 4 days to really process the circle on the Thursday nights that we have. And I get to the weekend and my life is so busy and, breakneck speed with 3 children in the modern world. But I think about bits and think, God, yeah, wow, that was powerful. And then I put up my posts on social media and I share to about 25 local pages. Word's getting out. People are resonating with it and saying, wow, this is incredible. NHS nurses reaching out saying, I'd love to signpost you. Would you mind? Of course I wouldn't. Of course I wouldn't. I've just recently done a Mental Health England online mental health first aid course because I felt like it was important I upskill because I have a duty of care, right? To put it bluntly, if someone were to come in to a circle and say, look, I think I'm going to go home and do something unsavory, that's my responsibility to follow up on that and, in theory, inform the authorities or whatever, inform the relevant people. That's never happened. Um, thank God, but it may happen. I understand that. It's a big responsibility, but it's not one I shy away from. I try to be of service to my fellow men and therefore I get something back myself. So I'm not sure if that really answers your question, but
It
it
really
just
does.
gives an insight into just how it's all interwoven like
Yeah,
a beautiful
yeah,
brotherhood web.
yeah. I love how you're also touching on the fact that you're very respectful of people's boundaries because if they're not ready yet to open up to, oh gosh, I'm not ready to face these demons, so to speak, I'm not ready to go there yet, that you're not chasing them, you're not out there trying to rescue them all. It's like you're really honouring that that's okay. That's okay. That's where they're at. And I'm very respectful of that. I love that because I think it's a very important point. And, I'm really, really glad to hear that you've not had a lot of, I call them pelters, like the rotten tomatoes getting thrown your way. It's like the judgment and the criticism. And then, but there will always be a bit of that because I know myself, when I've advertised on the local community page, the Facebook community page, I've had a number of pelters, coming my way. And it's like, oh my God, I'm trying to do a good thing.
Mm,
And I've had criticisms like, take your pseudoscience elsewhere, um,
mm,
prove to us that this works. What qualifications do you have? What else have I had? Oh, I had an admin remove a post. It was for silent counselling, which is a modality that I teach. And it gets to the root cause and it helps to discharge the negative emotion in somebody's body. It's absolutely born out of science. It's amazing and it changes lives. And I had the post removed by an admin saying the reason for it was stop preying on the vulnerable.
my goodness.
So it's like, oh my goodness, what is there, held within you that thinks that I'm a predator and I'm out there trying to harm the vulnerable where I'm actually trying to do the opposite. So there is a duality that we have to recognize. There are
Always.
some people that, you know, whatever, that person's lived experience has been, she's projecting her stuff onto me. And I thought, I'm not available for this. And I did get a bit disheartened, with the metaphorical rotten tomatoes getting thrown my
Mm,
way. I thought, oh my God, I've probably had lifetimes of this.
mm.
But it's fear, isn't it? It's fear projection. It's people's own wounds.
This is.
I think it's really, I could have gone back and argued, with these people, but I thought
Mm,
I'm not doing that. I'm not engaging in that kind of dynamic because it's not my responsibility. That is not my responsibility. And I love how what you've spoken about is recognizing people's self-responsibility.
Mm.
And I understand what you're saying about it is responsible, bringing people together. Of course it is. There is a level of responsibility, but equally so, no, you said earlier you can't, you can take people to the water, but you can't make them drink.
Yeah.
So it's like, here
Yeah.
are the spaces. I'm going to hold you in sacred space. I'm going to set up all the conditions for, having real breakthroughs here. But at the end of the day, you've got to do the inner work yourself. Nobody
Mm.
can save yourself but you.
Mm. And that's
So I love
tough.
how you've touched on that. Yeah.
Excuse me, it's tough for a lot of people because a lot of people are comfortably uncomfortable
Yeah.
and maybe not even consciously, but subconsciously don't want to work on themselves.
Hmm.
And this is when, and this was me,
Hmm.
when you find men in relationships that are not particularly fulfilling, not just men, of course, women as well, that are in
Yeah.
relationships where it's safer to be in this relationship because I couldn't possibly be alone. I don't say that with judgment. I again observe it. There are a lot of people out there that I can just see there's no love there, and that's really sad. I find that really sad.
Hmm.
Um, and of course, things like this trigger people because it's basically, holding that mirror up and saying, "Have a look at your life," and it's, "Oh no, it's fine. I'm fine. He's a good man, really," or she's, "Oh, we've got a nice life, we've got a nice house," and perhaps cognitive dissonance. And I don't say that from a place of judgment. I was there. I had a relationship for 3 years where it was like flogging a dead horse, but it was
Hmm.
I didn't want to be alone necessarily. And then I met my now wife, and then suddenly all of the songs about love, all of the poems, all of the gushy stuff suddenly just all made sense. I used to think it was all a sham. I used to think it was all a sham. It was all just like, Hollywood, the way they portray things. I just thought, nah, rubbish. But then I met my now wife, and oh, that's what they're singing about. This is not just lust. This is love, you
Hmm.
know? And unfortunately, there are a lot of people out there that haven't found that yet. Um, I had given up. I had given up when I was out in Poland. I'd had a previous experience, let's say, with a lady, and she was spiritually asleep, let's say. Wasn't interested in any of that, and I knew it would never work. I knew it would never work. She was very sort of, of the flesh, as it were. And it ended amicably, and I was gutted, and I just said, "That's it. I give up." I said it in my head. I said it aloud. I give up. I'm done. There's clearly no one out there for me. I give up. I'm done. I've tried, and I just constantly go through this heartache. And then within about 10 days, 14 days, my now wife appeared online. And then I started to believe in miracles,
Yeah.
you know? Um, but it's tough. You reminded me of actually the hurling of the rotten tomatoes. Yeah, there was a gay couple that came to one of the circles, two men. And I was really happy to get two gay men in because I want to break down every barrier there is, every single barrier, racism, homosexuality, whatever, right? Ageism. I want to break down every barrier and help men realize that we're all brothers in this and that we need to honor women as sisters, not as objects,
Hmm.
not like cattle. And this gay couple mentioned, well, actually, this fella messaged me and said, "Can I come along? I'm keen to, start meeting more people in the town." I said, "Of course." He turned up and said, "By the way, I've brought my partner. I hope you don't mind." And I said, "Well, fortunately, your partner is male because it's a men's circle." And it was kind of like a break the ice kind of moment because it's for men, not for women. And that's not to discriminate against women. You women already have a lot of fabulous circles, yoga, Pilates. And that's not to say yoga, Pilates are only for women. Of course they're not. But women are so much better at getting together in the coffee shop and, "How are you? Are you all right?" "Oh, having a bit of a grizzle. It's all right. Oh, I feel better now." Men are rubbish at that.
Hmm.
Unless they've had 10 pints and are crying because their team's lost at football. This gay couple came along, um, and they seemed uptight the whole time, particularly this one fella. And then they left early. They said, "Look, we need to leave. We need to sort things out at home." I said, "All right, fair enough. What can you do? No problem." It wasn't rude or anything. And I messaged him after and said, "By the way, there is a £10 energy exchange. And I charge a nominal fee to cover my costs for the hall. I bring tea, coffee, biscuits, cake, whatever." And he messaged back and said, "No, I don't think so. You didn't advertise this at all." I said, well, it's on my poster. It's on the post which you would have found. And I said it at the start of the circle. No, no, you need to be clearer. I'm refusing to pay. And I felt really triggered by this. I felt really angry because it wasn't about the £20, you know. It was about, it felt like an invalidation of my work, all the hard work I'd done to bring this all together. And it felt really frustrating and dismissive. But ultimately, I reached that point of it's only 20 quid and it's actually spiritually and emotionally better for me just to let these people go rather than get into an argument. I said, I understand. Good luck to you both. And that was it. Never heard back. Um, so yeah, there are the tomato throwers, um, that, sometimes they throw that, metaphorical tomato that might catch you off guard and you think, I just wasn't ready for that today. I didn't need this today.
Yeah.
But what doesn't kill you ultimately can only make you stronger.
It really does. And here you are still going and it's growing. And I can only imagine the impact that you're having on these men's lives because, gosh, without obviously going into too much personal detail, I've supported male clients over the last few years, and it's been such an incredible honor, for, as I say, a big strapping man, he hangs off my healing bed like 6 feet, five of them. And I've done silent counseling, I've done intuitive healing, a bit of coaching to turn someone around who had suicidal ideation for 2 years, had been signed off his very stressful job, let's say. He was high up in the police and investigating the worst of the worst crimes you can only imagine, and the secondary trauma that had that he'd taken on. And I'm just speaking about one example here. To being well again is just incredible, and living a life, a full life, and his wife and his daughters are like, oh my God, we've got our husband and our dad back.
Beautiful.
And he gives me far too much um, credence for his journey. It's his journey. He chose to step in. He chose to come along. He chose to do all the shadow work, so to speak, and to help heal himself. And that's where, I'm just witnessing that. So,
Mm.
like what you're talking about, I hold the space, I create the conditions, I facilitate the session, but really it's the men coming along taking responsibility for themselves, and that's the power that we each individually hold. We don't have to be victims to what's happened to us in the past, because many of us carry significant trauma and generational trauma. This is now time to step in and be the victor in your life. And I just love how you are creating those conditions for people to navigate their inner scape and get to know themselves at a much deeper level, Daniel.
Mm.
It must be such an incredible experience for you to be immersed in that energy field. I know what it's like for me when I'm holding space for women, but it's so profound what you're doing. It really is.
It's incredible. As I alluded to when we broke bread a week or so ago, the past couple of maybe three circles that we've had, January, yeah, but February, March, and April, it's like things have gone up another level in
Hmm.
terms of that, energetic, like almost like a force field, the power within that circle. Um, it's as if someone's plugged me into the mains and I come alive. And how can I word this? The best thing for me is that I find myself saying less and less and just stepping back and letting it happen. And then someone shares really openly about his troubles with alcohol addiction. And then another one talks back, and then another brother talks back. And then all of a sudden, it's just like this energy bouncing around. And there are always one or two that sit back and just nod, don't speak much, can see them processing it. And I'm managing it as opposed to leading it, let's say. I start by leading it, but in a way, I kind of make myself partially redundant within that space, which is ultimately incredibly important It's not from a place of ego. It's not, me standing in the middle of the circle saying, "Look at me, let me tell you how to live your lives for 2 hours," because it's simply not that.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
to witness that, and that's a great word, witness. To witness that is it's a privilege. It's incredibly special.
Hmm.
It's magical.
Hmm. I bet. So, anybody that's living in your neck of the woods, where can they find you? And I know I'm going to drop all your links below this episode because you're a languages teacher, you're multilingual, you're so talented, Daniel. It's unbelievable. So I'll pop your website
Thank you.
down there because you also provide online lessons and in-person lessons and language experiences as well. But if anybody's interested in coming along to your circle, finding out a bit more, where can they find you?
So I don't know if I told you this, but I live in a town called Sandwich, which is always funny to explain this. I mean, obviously, you're not a foreigner, we're from the same country, but let me explain. Whenever I've traveled and they say, "Where are you from?" And I've always tried to be vague. They say, "Oh, I'm from the southeast of England." Yeah, but whereabouts? I'm from Kent. Yeah, but whereabouts? Just a small town between Dover and Margate. Okay, whereabouts? Oh, here we go. And then I say sandwich. Oh, like the food, very funny. Um, the food was invented here, the snack, as it were, by the Earl of Sandwich. I forget which Earl. John Montagu was playing cards, and he had a piece of ham, and he didn't want to get his fingers greasy, so he kept putting it between two bits of bread. And anyway, in the end, he had a bite out of the sandwich, and then all of his associates said, "We want like the Earl of Sandwich. We want the sandwich." And I've traveled all over the world, and a lot of languages have adopted that word into their language, like
Yeah.
in French and many languages. Anyway, it's a very small town, very beautiful medieval English town. It's in the southeast of England, in Kent. If anyone lives in that catchment area, um, definitely come along. It's interesting because even though I live in this town and I'm from here originally, I would say about 70% of the men come from outside of the town and they drive in
Mm.
from towns all around, from as far as Canterbury, the other side of Canterbury. My good friend and my one of my great friends and brother, Reese Walker, whom I mentioned before, he lives on the London-Kent border. He comes down every 2 or 3 circles to drive down just to get his fill of the medicine and bring his energy. So I've had people driving in sometimes for an hour just to come to the circle, which is incredibly humbling. So yeah, if anyone wants to come along, as you say, you provide the links below, but it's on Facebook, it's the Men's Circle dash East Kent. Um, and on Instagram, I should remember this, but I think it's Men's Circle Sandwich at the moment, although I'm going to change it to East Kent, to be honest, because it covers quite a big area.
Mm.
If anyone's curious, if anyone is not sure and would just like to reach out, and reach me through one of the social media outlets, I'd be more than willing to spend time and just answer a few questions because sometimes it can be very blurry and unclear and you think, "Oh, I'm not sure." We just need a few answers. That's all. We just need to, hear a bit of reassurance. So I'd be happy to help anyone.
So kind of you. And I'm very, very, I'm sending, very consciously sending out my hopes and my intentions that this will inspire other men to start doing similar work, Daniel. So if anybody's watching or listening, or any wives, please encourage your husband to listen to this, or your partner to listen to this, your son, these male figures in your life, encourage them to listen to Daniel today because it might just, make them really think about, gosh, could I set up something similar? What is there available here? Because these statistics, you know, we're not statistics, we're human beings, and who knows just what one act can do to change so many lives. So
Absolutely.
I just want to thank you so much, Daniel, for being so generous with your time today and coming on the show to share
Honestly,
your
a
own
pleasure.
experiences.
Thank you.
And I just wish you so much luck. I know that this is just the start for you. I know that this is going to grow and become so, so big. It already is big work. You know the immensity of this work. but I know that it's going to spread. And thank you for being that spark and that catalyst for these men to change their lives. And it's a movement, and it's definitely going to build momentum. And thank you, thank you, thank you for all that you do.
Thank you for providing this space for me today to potentially reach so many people. And thank you for your time, and thank you for your beautiful energy that you've brought to our exchanges thus far.
Fantastic. Thank you everyone for tuning in today. As I say, we'll drop the links below this episode, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Soul Call with Kelly B today. If this episode spoke to your heart, I'd be so grateful if you'd take a moment to like, subscribe, or share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support truly means the world, and it helps this message ripple even further. And if you're feeling called to explore more of my work, my latest offerings, sessions, and ways to connect are all in the show notes below. I would love to hear from you. Until next time, keep listening to your beautiful soul. With so much love, Kelly.